Hey there YouTube, I am bringing you a deck profile from 2007. This is going to be Gladiator Beast, my favorite deck of all time. Actually it's 2008, but the point of this profile is to prove that Gladiator Beast are competitive even in the 2007, because there's only one card from 2008, and 2008 format with perfect circle. So first thing I want to go over is going to be very historic, but here I just have some other high rarity Gladiator Beasts being futuristic stuff that would use in a 2010 Edison format, and of course the Cold Wave OCG old texture. And I don't actually have War Chariots, so that's embarrassing. But let's go ahead and go over the extra deck prior to. So the extra deck, here is some stuff I have actually that's not going to be. So I have a Neurokios, which came out in 2014, Esadari, which is not available even in Edison. Wow, I couldn't think of it. 3 Battle Pack Prize Card Gazaris. Stunning cards. But after that, that's really just the only cards I have from more of a futuristic perspective. Everything else here is going to be historic in nature. So of course you have to start off with, and I'm going to show it off because Gladiator Beast is my favorite deck, is your 12 copies. Your 12 copies of Gladiator Beast Heraclinos. Maybe one day, these are all first ed, maybe you can see. And then OCG alties. Maybe one day this will be 15 copies, who knows? I do love Gladiator Beast Heraclinos. I think it's one of the most perfect cards. But let's go ahead and roll right into the traps. So really, a lot of the card pool in 2007, 2008, I think was actually kind of weak. Solemn Judgment obviously is overall just always a great card, but when you look at something like Ryza, when Ryza is one of the best cards in the format, and by no means am I saying Ryza is a weak card. So the reason it's 2008 is actually because of Prison. But going back to it, at no point am I saying that Ryza is a weak card, but when Ryza is like your strongest card in the format, I don't really think there's that many strong cards in the format. So my point being is that because of that, with that logic, I do think Gladiator Beast, if played in more of a retrospective, well, it played in a retro format, but a current perspective type thing, is definitely a viable deck list. So here I have Triple Solemn Judgment. I think Triple Solemn Judgment is extremely needed, especially when backed by Heraclinos. So Heraclinos, and sorry for all the shaking, but Heraclinos is obviously like a great card, but only being able to stop spells and traps, you do need the Solemn for the things such as really Ryza. Maybe Zaborg was kind of popular in some deck lists. Definitely a few monster cards that you want to hit, maybe the occasional spell and trap, just depending on what it is. But Solemn is just overall like a must-have answer. Deep Prison had just come out at the very beginning of 2008, so definitely like obviously when your Gladiator Beasts are all extremely small for the most part, outside of Quarry, I guess, being able to tie with Cyber Dragon, and then Heraclinos, which takes a lot of resources. Deep Prison is an incredible card, being able to really one-for-one, pretty much like the Cyber Dragons. Maybe now you'll see the occasional Doom Cow. I think the only time it's probably truly bad is against gadgets, but your monsters are pretty big, so unless you draw a relatively bad hand, I don't think you have a problem with that. I do have 2 Icarus attacks. I think this can be 1, but I do prefer 2, and I think even going forward, once a quest is removed, it definitely should be at 2, maybe even consider 3. This is because you always have access, instant access to a Wind Beast in terms of Gladiator Beast Gazaris. I also do run DD Crow as an additional target, but Icarus attack, just the disruption you get from Icarus attack, even in the modern game from 2021, pardon me, the disruption you get from Icarus attack it can be game breaking. It really can. And when you look back, like I said, 2008, where something like Ryza is probably your best card of perfect circle format, being able to hit or chain to hit Light and Darkness Dragons, being able to hit like Call the Haunted, Premature Burials prior to those going off, I think Icarus attack is actually an extremely crucial card. One thing about Icarus attack, and in this build you'll see I also run enemy controller. Icarus attack and enemy controller are extremely useful in later builds once Gazaris is released and Bestiarii is at 1. Because you summon Bestiarii, if they bottomless or have something that removes from play, if you chain that Icarus attack or that enemy controller to tribute that Bestiarii, it goes to the graveyard, thus always being available. And then everything else is standard. I think the Dust Tornado can kind of be cut. This is kind of, I don't want to say a placeholder because Dust Tornado overall is just a really good card. But when I think back to some of the trap lineups that Perfect Circle has, and really the top decks, Perfect Circle, I think Zombies, Gadgets were super popular, and maybe just like Standard Beatdown. I don't know if a lot of them had back rows that are super awesome, but Dust Tornado just ever being able to hit Torrential Tributes, Mirror Forces, maybe opposing Solemns, prior to them actually getting use out of it, I think that alone warrants Dust Tornado's use. So Dust Tornado, definitely a good card, but this deck, along with having triple Solemns, double Icarus Attack, MST, Heavy Storm, and Bestiaries, probably has a lot of room to stop stuff. So Dust Tornado would probably be one of the first cuts I would make to the trap lineup. However, I think it fits pretty well within this trap lineup. Moving on to spells. So they're really just, I don't know. I don't think there are very good spells in 2008. And maybe I just am missing something big, but I just don't see it. So I'm going to start with extremely stable stuff, which is those three. Past that, I don't really know. I think the rest of this is very biased. So I run Swords Revealing Light. I don't know. Again, I think it's a great card. I kind of took a lot of inspiration from, so this is prior to, I should mention this, prior to the release of Phantom Darkness, which came out in, I think, the tail end of January. So this deck with Dimensional Prison probably would have only been viable for maybe 2-3 weeks. So, but I did take a lot of inspiration from Paul Leventon's 2008 deck list victory. I think that proved that just the viability of tagging out was great, and at the same time, he only ran one Darius. So that tells me the introduction of Darius as Gladiator Beast, maybe it didn't play that massive of a role. However, I do think that him having Shadow Imprisoning Mirror probably played the biggest role, to be completely honest. But swords I run because, again, all of your monsters are weak outside of just like 1 or 2. It can buy you an extra turn, maybe an extra 2-3 turns. It can really get in there. It can do what you want it to do. I think swords, really throughout the history of Yu-Gi-Oh, probably kind of an underutilized card because people say it's too easy to target. It's a -1 later on. But in certain decks, it can just absolutely save you. Both of these were at 1, but I do run 1 Smashing, 1 Fissure. Again, just to get rid of those big monsters. I think 2008 format's really not plagued, but it's really defined by having one of those save resources in your hand and keep one strong monster on the board and play a slow game mentality. Smashing, Ground, and Fissure, obviously run with that. They lose really hard to Gadgets, they lose really hard to Gravekeeper Spy. But in terms of just having an opponent having maybe just like 1 Ryza, 1 Cyber Dragon, or something like that on board, they really shine. And then Book of Moon was at 1. So Book of Moon, historically, the best deck Book of Moon has ever ran in, probably Gladiator Beast. I think Gladiator Beast can do more with 1 copy of Book of Moon than any other deck, let alone 3 copies. So 1 copy only being available, I threw in, like I said, the enemy controller and a Shrink. Being quick play, obviously, went into my thought process of Book of Moon. So being chainable, I think Shrink is probably the worst of these. However, it still stops them from maybe even 1 turn. And that's what matters. So when you think of summoning a Monarch, and I know all my examples are based on Monarchs, and maybe Monarchs aren't that prevalent. But again, I really think this format was absolutely like defined by Ryza more than any other card. Maybe like Treeborn Frog, which Gladiator Beasts absolutely handle, and they love seeing that. What they don't love seeing is Ryza just continuously bouncing weak monsters or back rows back to hand. Being able to chain, even Shrink, and just slow them down towards like Book of Moon and Enemy Controller both defeat Ryza on the following turn, if not that turn. If it's something they can chain to and beat them on the following turn. Shrink saves you for a turn from Ryza. I think Shrink's an interesting card in general throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history, especially when we look towards the Lightsworn dominated formats and when they came out in 2008, and probably up through Edison format, maybe a little bit after that, with Honest. For some reason, and Honest is seen as a super strong powerhouse card. Maybe it's because you can play it from the hand. Maybe it's because of the attack point boost. But Shrink is kind of the same thing as Honest, just in a spell format, but it works for anything. Maybe, and honestly, I would say Shrink's probably a little bit more difficult to telegraph than Honest is. In a deck just filled with all, let's see, MST, Book Moon, enemy controller, all the traps I just showed off, I think Shrink is an extremely hard card to telegraph, but can like lead to the same results as Honest, just getting over big monsters. I think Honest just like definitively giving you an answer because it adds by that same attack makes it maybe a little bit better, but restricted to light types. I think Shrink does very much the same thing. I think Shrink is another one of those cards that historically might be a little underplayed. Or I think if we went back and played the lights one without Honest, maybe you might find them a little bit better and more consistent. But anyways, I digress. Moving into the monsters, so I play the 3 of Test Tiger. Not much to say. Test Tiger, being able to special summon itself in a deck that is entirely normal summon reliant is extremely important. Sometimes I struggle with Test Tiger. Maybe it'll change a little bit because I do have a lot more Gladiator Beasts, kind of maybe this time around. I don't really know. But having a hand of 1-2 Test Tigers and some spells and traps, you lose. So I do see in formats where people don't play Test Tiger, why they don't play Test Tiger, I totally understand it. But I think especially in 2007, there's just not enough card availability to fill up this space. Maybe you could play something like more DD Crows, because I run 1 copy right now. Maybe you could run 2-3 copies. I think DD Crow is an absolutely excellent card in this format, but I think Test Tiger is really kind of irreplaceable. I'm in 2 copies of Bestiary, thinking about 3 copies, and I don't think that's wrong, but Gladiator Beast succeeded with a lower monster count. 3 is definitely plausible, but I think historically, looking at 2, especially before the release of Gyzaris, 2's probably just always going to be the way to go. Not much to say. Bestiary is Bestiary. It's one of the best tags, but it can blow up if your opponent doesn't have back rows, but just the threat of having Bestiary really puts opponents in awkward positions of, do I set cards because I can't set them because they're just going to Bestiary it. I think there's a lot of games we play with that. Same thing with, well, not same thing, but I do run double Liquori. So Liquori is kind of interesting in this format. I think this is another card that I wanted to play 3 of, but couldn't bring myself to do it because I think sometimes other cards are a little bit better, specifically Cyber Dragon. But Liquori, obviously it's needed for Heraclinos, which is the reason you have played it all. But being the strongest Gladiator Beast is very important, but that 2100 point mark is really, it's vital in any format that has Cyber Dragon. If there were 22, Liquori would be damn near unstoppable, to be honest. But being 21, there's no normal summon monster that can get over Liquori. Cyber Dragon ties with Liquori. That alone means that if you get a turn 1 Liquori, your opponent now has to waste some kind of resource to get over your Liquori. And that's huge. That is absolutely huge. I think that's almost worth running 3 copies of. But having other copies of Gladiator Beast in this deck that I'm about to go through, I think having doubles of everything is a little bit more important, especially when I can recur this via Call the Haunted, Premature Burial, whatever it is, and put it back in the deck. I think that's enough. I then have 2 copies of Murmillo. Murmillo is a good 1 of, Murmillo is a good 2 of. Opening up with Murmillo, not great, but being able to, not having a Murmillo in the deck is even worse. Being able to summon Murmillo and attack and tag out, especially in a format like that that's marked by relatively weak monsters, being all the Destiny Heroes, Treeborn Frog, anything goes in defense, because again, 2008 format really was probably about the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where setting monsters became a real, true, viable strategy up until Subterra came out. Murmillo could very easily just run into something and just tag out, so it's not that huge a deal. So I do run 2 Murmillos. I have 2 Heraclinos, 2 Hoplomus. Hoplomus, very similar to Liquori, however, in the opposite effect that turn 1 I set it. There's no turn 1 monster that can get over this unless they go Cyber Dragon, Sacrifice or something. And if you get this out with 2400 defense, with that 6-pack put on it, unless they double tribute for a Light and Darkness Dragon, no decks just have natural outs to Hoplomys. 6 Samurai, if you're playing the 1-of 6 Samurai, and they are able to bring out Great Shogun Shin, and you have absolutely no back row to help with that, that can get over Hoplomys. I don't know. I'm struggling to think of anything else I can get over Hoplomys. So really, Laquari and Hoplomys, I think, those are the biggest reasons that this deck can honestly compete with like Monarch decks, especially Hoplomys. It might be weird to hear that, but I think Hoplomys, if I open this, I feel immediately safe. If I tag into this in defense, I feel immediately safe. I think there's a lot to be said for Hoplomys. And this card that I'm struggling with, because it seems to be my spirit card and I draw every single time, is Gladiator Beast Secutor. Let me go ahead. I'm going to see if I can fan these out to kind of show everything. That didn't work the greatest. We'll put Secutor over here. So Secutor, if it's tagged in by the effect of Gladiator Beast, when this card attacks or is attacked, if it lives, and look at those stats, they're terrible, and only if it's summoned by the effect of Gladiator Beast, you get to special summon 2 Gladiator Beast. So why do I run this? I think a lot of it has to do with my 1 copy of Rescue Cat. That even with these test tigers, even if you draw Secutor, it's not guaranteed to be a dead draw. These 2, I think, are probably 2 of the worst monsters, but they open up the most plays. If I were going into a very long tournament, if I were going into a locals, I definitely won't run these to try them out. If I were going into a very long tournament, SJC, regional, whatever it might be, I would struggle to find myself wanting to play Secutor and Rescue Cat, just because if you draw them and you don't have the targets available immediately, you kind of, like, it might just automatically lose you the game right away. These might be something that I do replace that other Laquari or that other Bestiary, or maybe even a 3rd Hoplomys for. But Secutor, Rescue Cat comboing with both the test, or with all 3 test tigers, I think opens up the field to want to play Secutor and being able to get that 1 card Heraclinos. That I can now make Heraclinos and still keep all my hand and field advantage that I have built up at no cost. So for that very specific reason, I think 1 Secutor is worth it. However, every time I play test this deck, that's just my card. That's my card. I skip these. I don't know why, but I want to keep all the Gladiator Beasts together. 2 copies of Cyber Dragon, they really speak for themselves. I can't really do anything. Like, I can't sacrifice them for anything. I can't summon Rise off them. I can't limit or removal to double their attack, but they're Cyber Dragon. Very similar to Test Tiger, in a deck that is absolutely, I don't want to say plagued by normal summons, but reliant on that normal summon. Cyber Dragon is a breath of fresh air. If your deck is just all built on normal summons, gadgets, zombies of the time, Elemental Hero, Destiny Hero type decks, Cyber Dragon is just, it's one of the best cards, and I'll leave it at that. Sangan searches everything. Spirit Reaper, could be anything else, but I just have a strong love for Spirit Reaper as a card in general. And then finally, DD Crow. Spirit Reaper could be another DD Crow. Shoot, in this format, maybe even play 3 DD Crows. DD Crow just crushes Perfect Circle, as it should. It's very good against multiple cards in the deck. And Zombies, which were 2 of the most prime decks at the time, the decks you see more than anything. I think that alone could be reason to, that alone gives me a reason to main the DD Crow. But honestly, that might be enough to main 2 DD Crows and definitely side the 3rd, if not side 2 DD Crows while maining 1. But really, that is my whole deck list. I hope you guys enjoyed this max rarity Gladiator Beast. I'm missing a few first heads, but oh well, a few packs. I really tried. I believe it or not, I looked pretty hard for an SJC Shrink to throw in this deck, and I could not find anyone selling a Shonen Jump Shrink, nor a Pharaoh's Tour Ultra Rare Shrink. So please know, I did look, I couldn't find it. Anyways, let me know what you guys think, and please like, comment, subscribe. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.